So I think I've just experienced what I'm going to call an MND blip. Let me explain. And the last couple of weeks I have experienced something that I haven't really experienced before. I couldn't put my finger on what was causing it, but it was the first time that I was sort of affected up there. I felt unmotivated, I felt lost, I didn't really have any urge to sort of do anything with just life in general. If I went somewhere, I was physically there, but I wasn't mentally there, if that makes sense. And over the last couple of weeks, I've sort of felt I could not be the positive person that I once felt I could. And I've slowly come to terms with the fact that I've got motor neuron disease, and I've been able to deal with the physical limitations, but I've not yet experienced the mental hurdles that maybe only someone else with motor neuron disease can understand and go through to try and get over. So I'd like to share 10 things that I've felt that has helped me live and deal with motor neuron disease the best I can over the last 3 years, as well as helping me overcome what I've called this MND blip. So the first thing that I learned very quickly was to accept the fact that I have motor neuron disease. It's hard, it's tough, there is no treatment, there is no cure, and I learned very early on to accept that fact. It did take me a while, and I did go through some challenging times, especially after my initial diagnosis. The unknown, not knowing what to do. My little girl was recently born and we now had 3 children to look after, and I've got in my head thinking, how am I going to be, the best dad that I can be and a husband to my wife? I did turn to alcohol quite quickly, and I suppose tried to use that as a coping mechanism to block out what I've just been told. And if you watched my first ever video on this channel about my whole story and journey up until my diagnosis, you'd know that it took about 2 years for me to actually get diagnosed. So I did utilize drink quite a lot, as probably many of us did, because in that time was lockdown and COVID, and I'd imagine most people did the same, even without having motor neuron disease hanging over their head. So back to the point, my first, I suppose, recommendation or advice that has worked for me is the acceptance of having motor neuron disease. How you do that, that's up to you. But the sooner and the quicker you can accept the fact that you have this condition, the quicker I think you can overcome certain things like I've recently experienced with this MND blip that I'm calling. On to number 2. I think communication is probably another good thing to be able to do, and I suppose the downside with motor neuron disease is that, unlike myself at the moment, it does affect people's speech and the way they can communicate. So making sure that you can adapt to share your thoughts and your feelings to your loved ones and be able to have someone to vent and communicate your feelings and thoughts while living with this condition is equally as important. Now, I have a really good sort of network of support from my wife, my friends, my family. Everyone is very open and able to have quite sort of deep conversations about motor neuron disease, and they always ask how I'm feeling and how I'm coping with things and if there's anything that I need. I've yet to need to utilize things like that, but knowing that I've got that available to me, I think is really important and helps me know that if I do ever feel like the way I did a couple of weeks ago, I've got someone there that I can have a conversation with. If you don't have that option of just having a chat with someone, then look at the charities that are around, and I'll give you a prime example. One of the main ones here in the UK is the Motor Neurone Disease Association. They have a helpline, and I believe, I haven't actually experienced it myself, but I believe that you can contact someone within the charity, and there is either someone there that you can have a discussion with or a chat to, and if there isn't, I believe that there is someone that they can put you in touch with. So communication, I think, is another big thing to have in your back pocket. Okay, on to number 3. So a role adjustment, which I'm going to call dad shifting. Dad shifting I've tried to adopt as my condition is slowly progressing, which, let me add, I'm very, very grateful that I have a slow progressive version of motor neuron disease, but I'm still progressing. I'm still getting weaker in my limbs. I'm still feeling very fatigued and tired from day to day. And if I overexert myself, I am almost non-existent for my kids especially, and my wife. So having a role adjustment in our sort of family dynamic is something that I've had to try and, I suppose, overcome is more of the case, because up until motor neuron disease was ever in existence, I was always the person in my family that did I need to say this politically correct, the manly things around the house. And I hope you understand what I mean by that. So doing the DIY bits, being able to, if I wanted to decorate the house or relay some floor or even help my wife do something that she might not be strong enough to do physically, I was the person that she would ask. Something simple like opening a jar. The role reversal now is that I have to ask my wife to do little things like that. And that really can affect you up here, in my experience, because my mind is telling me that I can do something and I am strong enough to do it, but physically, when I come to try and do a task like the simple thing of opening a jar, I can't. And it's that role reversal that is important, I think, that will help. Well, it's helped me to adapt and adjust to the new way of life living with motor neuron disease. And it's even the case with my children. I was always very sort of hands-on. You know, I love what you call rough play, wrestling with my 2 boys. My little girl loves to be tickled and chased and things like that. And it is tough to not be able to do that type of thing that you used to be able to do. You know, when you see those videos or clips of films and you've got the dad throwing their children in the air and catching them, remembering that I was able to do that when my oldest boy was born, and not being able to do that since then is a tough thing to try and get your head round. But I try and focus on the things that I can do rather than the things that I can't, because I think if I try and focus too much on the things that I can't, it will just mess with my head. And I think I got into that point mentally the last couple of weeks, which has caused what I've called an MND blip. On to number 4. So self-care is probably another thing to look at. And this isn't me giving advice. This is me sharing my experience of how I've overcome or tried to overcome and still overcoming the fact that I have motor neuron disease. And self-care, I think, is very important. Now, I have to admit that I haven't really given myself any self-care, as we're calling it. And what I mean by that is doing things that you like to do, enjoy, hobbies, and making sure that you prioritize time for yourself. And if that means spending time with friends, family, your children, or even just on your own, is to do it. Don't put things off. And my life is, I don't lead a very exciting life, but I do try and prioritize most of my time with my children. There's 3 of them. There's a lot of love to give. There's a lot of attention to show them. And I want to be able to do that for as long as I can, as hard work as it is, being a dad is tough, even without motor neuron disease, but being a dad with motor neuron disease and still trying to show that you are the person that they want to look up to is something that's quite important to me, rather than the person that they think that is deteriorating slowly. And again, like I said earlier, I'm very fortunate that it is a slow progressive version, so they can hopefully adapt as I do get weaker and less able. But yeah, self-care I think is something that has helped me manage my condition. And that could be something simple like going out for lunch with my wife, changing the dynamic of a day rather than just having the same process every single day. So it's having a change up in your day-to-day life is something that has worked for me and helped with my self-care, I suppose, as we're calling it. And not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's been quite hard to try and adjust to life. I've always been very independent with wanting to do something on my own. If I can't do it, I'll find out how, and then I'll try and give it a go. I'm a kind of person that if you had instructions in a flat pack bit of furniture, I'll try and put it together without reading the instructions first, and then I'll have to revert back to them if I make a mistake. So that analogy works with MND because my mind is telling me that I can do something, so I'm going to give it a go. But the repercussions of trying to do that is tiredness, fatigue. You know, my arms will become even weaker, and I've then got to rest to overcome what I've just tried to do. So that's enough of that one. On to point 5. So point 5 has sort of mixed in between a couple that I've already mentioned, is quality time. Quality time is what I look for in terms of spending time with my loved ones, mainly my wife and my children. And like I said, my children can be very hard work, but sometimes life, and especially with what I have been doing the last couple of years and being completely immersed in sharing my journey and experience with motor neuron disease on the likes of social media, YouTube, Instagram, you can let it run away with you. And I think making sure you disconnect from other things that may get in the way will give you back that quality time that you are able to spend with loved ones and my children in my case. So even if that's like in the summer, we took our 30-year-old motorhome to 3 different campsites. I'll put the link in the description for the holiday vlogs that I put up. And that was really, really nice. And it did a couple of things. One, it gave me an opportunity to get out of the normal day-to-day routine that I find myself doing. And 2, it gave me the opportunity to almost forget that I have MND. And that's easy for me to say because I'm not in a position like many others are living with this condition that are immobile, whether that's in a wheelchair or if they're sort of further along in their progression and they're on like something like a ventilator or having a peg for feeding, things like that. And I'm sure my time will come, but hopefully not for a long time. So it did give me an opportunity when I was having a break away from the routine that you find yourself in day to day at home, having a break with my family and my children. And I think what that enables me to do is focus on trying to make memories rather than trying to just live life with motor neuron disease. If I focus on something other than MND, and I think that hasn't helped in the way that I have felt the last couple of weeks, it does take my mind off things. On to point 6. Financial planning. That sounds boring as hell because I hate anything to do with numbers or finances, and it's fortunate that my wife does. She's very organised and is very careful and good with money. And I think that has taken a huge sort of stress off me having to worry about financial commitments and things like that, because my wife does deal with a lot of it, especially when I had to leave my job because of motor neuron disease. For those that don't know, I was a fully qualified barber I retrained over lockdown after spending 10 plus years in a sales environment, predominantly as a car salesman. And I absolutely loved that job. And it was probably one of the hardest things that I had to overcome as well, is leaving a job that I actually really enjoyed. It wasn't even a job. That's probably another video. Hold that thought. If you want me to do a video about my work, let me know in the comments. But back to the financial side of things, I think if you are in a position to and have the means to have someone like my wife take over the financial side of things within the household, it takes off a massive weight off your shoulders, and it allows me to sort of breathe a little bit and concentrate on other things that will help me mentally and physically living with MND. Okay, point number 7 is emotional support. Now, I've probably covered this in a couple of other points that I've already spoken about, but I think it's equally as important because I'm not a very an emotional person. Is that a word? I'm not a very emotional person, probably what I need to say. And I can bottle up things quite a lot. And I think that has become apparent in the recent sort of last couple of weeks when I felt the way I did feel. So I think emotional support is something that is good to have available to you. Now, if you don't have it available from friends, family, partners, children, go and find it. I think having the option to speak to someone to help you deal with this condition emotionally, physically, obviously mentally, is really helpful. And I think for me, knowing that's there rather than utilising it is almost more important than actually utilising it, if that makes sense. I did sort of overcome my MND blip, as I'm calling it, myself, and that was almost done sort of trial and error by doing a few things, one of which was having a little bit of a break from social media. I've been very focused on that since I was diagnosed, trying to raise awareness, as you may have noticed if you've been following me for a while. And I think it become almost too much, and I was getting completely immersed in it, making sure that I was putting a video up and saying the right thing and being consistent. And I think it got a little bit too much. If you saw a post that I put up on my Instagram a couple of days ago, I even went to the extreme of thinking, was it social media? And was it even the name that I've given myself on social media? Now, with a name like James Smith, quite limited on getting that as a user handle. So Diagnosed Dad was the most relevant, and what seemed to be a good name at the start, I was thinking, well, maybe it's the word diagnosed that was causing me my MND blip, having the word diagnosed slapped in my face every time I wake up in the morning, had my coffee, and do what I would imagine the majority of people do in this day and age, and look at their phone and open up a social media platform. So I did try a couple of different names, and if you did notice that, even on the YouTube channel, I do apologise for any confusion. But now I've got over this MND blip, it has made me realise that it isn't the name that was causing it. It was just a lot of things that have almost spiralled a little bit out of control. And I had to sort of, this sounds really corny, but reground myself and take a little bit of time out from social media to make me realise what was causing the way I was feeling. On to point 8. So educating yourself about motor neurone disease. It's a blessing and a curse, and I'll explain why. The blessing part of it is you get a better understanding on what motor neurone disease is. I think it's important to educate yourself about the condition to help you adjust to how your type of motor neurone disease is progressing. Everyone is different with this horrible disease. Everyone is going through it differently and has different speeds and different types of motor neurone disease. And I think it's important to have a good understanding what it is, even if you're living with it, not only for yourself to potentially help, and I'll refer back to point one, come to the realization you have motor neuron disease, but it's also to help others understand it as well. It's mad, even in today's age, that people still don't know what motor neuron disease is, even with the high profile people that have unfortunately lost their life with it, the likes of Rob Burrow, Doddy Weir. People still even come to me and say, what is MND? What's ALS? Oh, is that what Michael J. Fox has, or is that what Muhammad Ali had? And it is mind-blowing that it is still not a condition that people know much about. This is why I do videos like this, to try and raise more awareness. But the curse side of it, of educating yourself too much, is that it can become overwhelming, and you can potentially get yourself into a bad place mentally, because like I did when I was on the lead up to my diagnosis, I was Googling everything, and I was looking for mimicking options that it could potentially be rather than the motor neuron disease. And it can become too much. I think it's important to listen to your healthcare professionals, your neurologists, things like that. But it's also important, I think, if you can find someone that is living with this condition, and don't take this the wrong way, that has the same type of MND that you have, then utilize them. They will help you, I think, more than anyone else, because they can give you an idea and understanding in how they have adapted or how their progression is, and it'll give you an idea. If you're like me and you want to know what's next, and a little sort of insight to the future, as horrible as it's going to be with MND, I think it's helped me know what is coming in the type of MND that I have. So it can be a bit of a curse, I think, but it can give you some benefits. I hope that made sense. I hope that helped. On to point 9. Okay, my last couple of points. Number 9, adaptations and modifications to your house, flat, apartment, wherever you live, to what I called future-proofing for the inevitability of what motor neuron disease will become. Now, a couple of years ago, I had to get my whole house renovated to make sure that there were the right things in place to adapt to life with MND. So that was creating a wet room, having a wash-dry toilet, raising the flooring in my garden, raising the garden level, so everything had a level threshold for wheelchair access. It was a really stressful time, and I feel very lucky that I was able to do this with help from a few places, mainly a family member and other avenues like charities such as the Motor Neurone Disease Association, Challenging MND, and my local council. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been able to do what we have done to our house. And I've had to utilise certain things like the wash-dry toilet that we've had installed, because I can no longer use my arms and hands to, how can I say this nicely, to go for a number 2, if that makes sense. So having a wash-dry toilet to keep my independence has been an absolute godsend. But what it was also done is taken a weight off my shoulders, because knowing that I have everything in place, ready and waiting for if and when I need it, is a complete sort of stress relief. And I think that's a good point to bring up, is stress is a killer. Try and be as unstressed as possible, and to get over the stress, try and get everything in place so you don't have to worry about it. Easier said than done, I know. I will probably do a video on what adaptations I've had done to my house, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a video just purely on what I've had done to my house, to give you maybe an understanding, an idea of what you could do to yours if you're in the same position, where you can get grants from and help from, because it was a minefield and a lot of paperwork. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you want me to do that video. Now on to my last and final point, is trying to have a positive mindset. And again, everyone's going to be dealing with this condition differently. It is hard enough to stay positive even without MND, with all the negativity in the world. But try and stay as positive as you can be. You will have bad days like I've done, and what I've called an MND blip, where you do feel negative about everything, you hate the world and you hate why you've got MND. But I think I have realised, especially getting over this little bit of a hurdle, is being positive has helped me deal with this condition. Being positive is definitely something that has helped me. I encourage you to do the same. And something that I have recently been told that is stuck in my head that makes complete sense, and I can see this helping me in the future, is you don't live with MND, MND lives with you. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope some of the points have helped or will help you, or if you know someone living with this condition, will help them. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I've got a plane going across now, so it's a good time to call it a day, and I'll see you on the next one.
Mind over matter, mind over MND. We do this together. Join hands with me. I wish that we never met. Paths get crossed and you're on to the next. You make it so hard to forget. You take so much, not an ounce of regret.